was a sculpture which some people have likened to the end times beast described in the Bible, which was just removed from the United Nations in New York City a few days ago. The statue was likened to the beast from the book of Revelation and was supposed to be the guardian for international peace and security. It was placed in front of the UN last November, right in front of the Visitors Plaza. A spokesperson for the United Nations said that the sculpture was never meant to be permanent. It was created by artists Jacopo and Maria Angelis, and they said that it represents a fantastical creature or animal and was donated to the United Nations by the government of Oaxaca, which is a state in southwestern Mexico. And although some people may have considered the winged lion to be art, others were not so fond of it, saying that it looked eerily similar to the beast described by the Apostle John in the Bible's book of Revelation and by the prophet Daniel in the Old Testament. Daniel chapter 7 verses 2 through 4 describes the beast with the body of a lion and wings of an eagle. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. The Apostle John described the beast with similar features in the New Testament. In the passage of Revelation chapter 13, verse 2, it says, And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and the feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So this was a statue that the United Nations chose to represent international peace and security. But when you look at it, does it really give you a sense of peace or security? What do we think, Peter, was going on here? How do we interpret this event and this sculpture being placed there in front of the United Nations?
Well, I think I just heard about that today, and I looked it up, and it's quite a stunning image. Now, it is very colorful. It's this this style of art they do in southern Mexico called alebrijes. They make these very fanciful-looking animals with lots of colors. So, okay, fine. You can say, just a coincidence. They just happen to make a leopard with wings and a great open mouth. But I get the impression that some of the people who make these decisions at the highest level of government, they like to mess around with some imagery from the Bible even. And I would just say, to people who like the sensationalism of this kind of imagery and they think it's kind of fun to play around with, or maybe they have a slightly darker or cynical view on that imagery, they need to remember that the underlying truth of all that is that Jesus is coming back, and the world under man's power is trending constantly more and more towards suffering and disaster, and that Jesus will come back and fix it all.
It's interesting that this sculpture is so closely similar to the descriptions in the book of Revelation and Daniel. You wonder if the artist actually got the concept from the Bible. And again, the United Nations spokesman said that it was supposed to represent peace and security, but when you look at an image like that, it's hard to imagine that would be the image of peace.
Yeah. In general, you see the kind of artwork that some of the people at high levels in the world like. There's some pretty dark stuff. I think people have a fascination towards darkness, or maybe they consider it to be kind of a grim, ironic sense of humor. But whatever the case is, I mean people need to appreciate where we get that imagery from and the truths that are being told there. That's the most important thing, I think. There's been a lot of unrest in the Central Asian country of Kazakhstan. This started just a few days ago, beginning of the week, I think January 2nd. And
Which used to be part of the former Soviet Union.
Used to be part of the Soviet Union, that's right. One of the largest countries in the world, but not a very big population, but still quite an important country for its location. And things devolved very quickly there to the point, like, by now, just a few days later, dozens of people have died. People have been attempting to storm government buildings.
It started with a spike in petrol and fuel costs.
We've seen these kinds of things happen before, and often the story that comes out later shows us that we didn't really get the full picture at the beginning, that there might have been other things happening behind the scenes.
Do you think there is a possibility that Russia's already faced with the Ukraine situation, nearly 100,000 or more Russian troops on the border of Ukraine? Do you think that this situation in Kazakhstan is similar to what's happening in the Ukraine?
Kazakhstan is a member of what's called the Collective Treaty Security Organization. It's a number of countries in the region, of which Russia is also a member. And they have invited already peacekeepers from this organization to come into Kazakhstan to help stabilize things. So already, as we speak, Russian and other troops are in Kazakhstan. People have compared this to what they call the color revolutions, these different seemingly grassroots movements that erupt violently in countries. And then down the line, it often turns out that there was some powerful intelligence organization kind of flexing its muscles, maybe to send a message for whatever reason. We just don't know. I think there's just a lot we don't know.
It seems like there is a chess game that is going on in that part of the world. Certainly with the Ukraine having been a part of Russia for 200 years before it became its own entity within the Soviet Union. The premier of Russia, Khrushchev, was actually born in the Ukraine. And it's just a very interesting set of circumstances. It seems like the chess pieces are being moved on the table.
Yeah.
To what end, we don't know right now.
What should Christians think? Like, when we see a country having a revolution, do we sympathize with them? Do we think, wow, they shouldn't be doing that? What do we think about that kind of stuff?
As Christians, I think that the best thing we can do is pray for these peoples, ask God to send His Holy Spirit, and possibly mobilize a mission group of people that would be interested in bringing or helping them in some way with the gospel or with provisions. But certainly I think I think there's been some call that the United States should even intervene.
Well, sure.
Hasn't there?
There's always politicians who like to make noise and who want to put pressure on Russia, and they shroud that talk with imagery of, supporting the people. I think there's kind of in a lot of Western countries, there's a very quaint, kind of naive attitude toward violent revolutions, because we look at some of our own founding stories with such rose-colored glasses. We have the American Revolution, there was a French Revolution, a Mexican Revolution, and in these countries, people are taught from a young age that these were, noble, good things that happened, and I think that gives us a little bit of a jaded look. When we look at the problems in some other countries, we think, oh, well, maybe that's a good thing that's happening. But I certainly agree with you that the thing for Christians to do is we must feel sympathy for these people, and the people who are losing their security, losing their opportunities. They need peace. That's what they need.
We have some news on the vaccine passports. A number of Swedish residents who have decided to implant microchips with their vaccine passport into their hands has risen since Sweden announced new COVID restrictions. Sweden has been a world leader in the area of chip implants in humans. On December 1st, Sweden enacted new rules that require individuals to have a passport at all events with more than 100 people. Vaccine passes are a measure that we see as necessary, Karen Wissel of the Swedish Public Health Agency said last November. We cannot just kick back and hope for the best, he said, and had a microchip with his vaccination passport inserted into his left hand. When scanned, all his information about COVID-19 is reflected on his mobile phone. According to Euronews.com, around 6,000 people in Sweden have had a chip inserted into their hands since 2014. Swedes have swapped out their car keys, train tickets, and driver's licenses for the convenience of a microchip. The people who have the chip are saying that it even makes them feel healthier. It's a transition that many call the Internet of Bodies, or medical implants and other devices that are inside your body and link to the internet. It's actually an ecosystem, Mary Lee, who's a member of RAND, which is a nonprofit institution that helps improve policy and decision making, explained. It's a bunch of devices that are connected to the internet that contain software that collects personal health data about you or can even alter the body's function. We think of this as internet bodies, as a collection of all these devices as well as the data. The Atlantic magazine called it a health tool and predicts that it will become more popular. In 2018, journalist Haley Weiss wrote, "As with most technologies, the tipping point for implantable chips will come when they become so useful they're hard to refuse. It could happen sooner than you think." In other COVID news, several European nations have reintroduced restrictions since the rise of the Omicron variant. Austria has instituted a full lockdown. The Netherlands is requiring businesses to close early, and Germany is inching closer to a nationwide vaccine mandate after barring the unvaccinated from public places like gyms and restaurants. President Biden announced last week new plans to combat COVID-19 through the winter, including stricter testing for those entering the United States. He said, though, it doesn't involve shutdowns or lockdowns, but it will involve widespread vaccinations and boosters and a lot more testing. The White House's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says he believes that the virus will never come to an end. "We're going to have to start living with COVID," he said on the CBS show Face the Nation. He said, "I don't think we're ever going to be able to eradicate it." So what do we think about the microchip situation in Sweden, or the possibility of that spreading around the world, the situation with COVID? Any takes on that, Peter?
Oh, microchips have been big news, I think, even since they were just a theory. And of course, people have actually been putting them in themselves now for a number of years. It's something. I mean, there are.
We have to wonder if we're marching toward the mark of the beast.
Well, I think a lot of Christians in modern times have thought that the mark of the beast could be a microchip, and the technology is certainly getting to the point where that is a possibility. I think there's limits to how beneficial technology can be. Like, do we need implants to help us interact with other electronics? I don't think so. I mean, I think people would be better off. There's so much amazing human knowledge that is being lost every year. We're losing touch with nature. We're losing touch with each other. We're losing touch with God's Spirit, unfortunately, as a population. There is so much that we can look to that is clean, wholesome, tried and proven for thousands of years, and would really make people so much happier, would make families more secure, get along better, and so much more important than trying to integrate ourselves with computers.
Where the Winter Olympics are taking place in China, now there are cities that are being locked down because they don't want the spread of the Omicron variant. And we just heard there was a new variant that was discovered in France yesterday. It's not quite made it into the news. We'll see if it does by the time this video gets out. It's interesting that somebody like Dr. Anthony Fauci thinks that maybe we're just going to have to live with COVID-19. Do we think that that's the case? I know as Christians we pray that the COVID completely goes away.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things we just don't know what's going to happen.
Yes, and in relation to the microchips and the whole thing that's going on in Sweden right now, we keep our eye on that to see if that spreads through any other countries in Europe, like the Germans take it up or the Danes. How it relates to Bible prophecy.
There's so much that smartphones do for us nowadays, but it's something that is delicate and can be lost, broken easily. It's funny. How can we depend so much on something like a smartphone that is rather vulnerable? And I think people are taking that to the next level and saying, well, let's make this something that you can't lose. You can't, drop in the well or whatnot.
Okay, well, we have one other current event that we would like to discuss, and that is something that is happening between Iran and the United States right now.
So another story is the ongoing attempt for the United States and Iran to re-enter the deal that they had, and under this deal, which went into effect during the second term of the Obama administration, of which Biden was a member, Joe Biden, who is now president. Iran was allowing very intense scrutiny of their energy sector, of their nuclear energy program, and in exchange, they were allowed to participate without restrictions in the global economy. They had their sanctions lifted. They had money returned to them that had been confiscated, and things were looking on the up and up between Iran and the Western world. Now, of course, those sanctions went back into effect. The United States pulled out of that agreement in 2018.
Israel was very against that agreement, of course.
Israel, yeah, well, the mixed reaction, because I think a lot of even some pretty tough Israeli security people, they saw that, look, we need to have a peaceful resolution. Some serious people will often come to serious conclusions, even if it's kind of against what you might expect of their nature as being, military people or having a hawkish bent. So thankfully, even now, we are seeing signs out of the United States and out of Israel that are in favor of getting back to some kind of agreement with Iran.
What would be the disadvantage of the United States redoing that deal with Iran? Are there any disadvantages, or would it be all favorable outcome if we're able to shake hands with Iran again? What do you think?
Oh, that's a pretty big favorable right there. If you can draw this country with their amazing history and culture and their potentially very powerful economy, draw them into our circle of friendship. I think the possible detriment is that people think that the Iranian government would be acting in bad faith and using this agreement as a cover to continue on with a nuclear weapons program.
Right. A lot of Americans go back to the siege of the American embassy when Carter was president, and they still hold that grudge against the Iranis. Are these the same people now that we're trying to shake hands with and make a deal with?
Yeah, well, so do you think the Iranians are acting in good faith, that they would be worthy partners in a deal like this?
I guess it just remains to be seen. If they say they want to come to the table, I think it's not the same situation as it was when Obama was president. I think the Iranian government has a bit of a higher bar right now that they want the United States to jump over to make a deal, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, yeah.
And what is that higher bar?
Well, it seems like they want a guarantee that the sanctions will be lifted. That's for them. They went through all the negotiations. They gave up a fair amount of their sovereignty, even by allowing inspectors in and allowing the United States to dictate their energy policy in exchange for lifting the sanctions. So now that the United States has pulled back from all that, Iran feels a little hurt, and I guess you could say that's justified, and they want guarantees before they offer anything.
I think part of the problem with the Obama agreement with Iran is that agreement never went to the Congress of the United States, because if an agreement can go to the Congress and Congress supports it, then no president can just pull out without going back to Congress.
That's right.
We'll see what happens this time around.
Yeah. Lord willing, they can make something that's stronger, that works for all parties involved, that works for Israel, for Iran, and that can lead to some cooperation in that region.
Yeah, it brings us to the point of the division that exists in this country, in the United States today, and the country is so divided that yesterday, or a few days back when they had the anniversary of the January 6th uprising in Washington, that only one Republican congresswoman, Miss Cheney, was there representing the Republican Party. It just shows you how divided the country is. So whether they can get together on an Iran American deal or not, we've never seen division this deep in our lifetime in the United States before.
Well,
we hope that some of what we've talked about here has opened your eyes to different situations around the world and has been a blessing for you. If you have any comments on anything we've said during this segment, we'd like you to write to us and leave your comments below. And certainly if you haven't subscribed to our channel as yet, this is an opportunity, an invitation to do that by clicking that little button down there. Be sure you also click the notifications button so you get everything, all of our new content that we put out all the time. Thanks for watching.